to our Surfacing Creative Leadership conversation on the courageous authenticity dimension of the Leadership Circle profile. Our world is desperate for creative leadership, and we at Leadership Circle know that you, as coaches and leaders, are in the best position possible to provide that, whether that's through your own leadership or in the way that you coach and guide others to step into theirs. And with our Surfacing Creative Leadership series, what we're trying to do is begin an ongoing conversation to unpack, demystify, and surface insights within the dimensions of the LCP, one dimension at a time. Today, we're exploring courageous authenticity, the creative competency that reflects a leader's capacity to speak truth with power and love, and how that courage to be real strengthens trust, it deepens connection, and it drives meaningful change. To get us started, we'd love to hear from you about how courageous authenticity shows up in you and others that you know and in your own leadership. And while you're doing that, while you're putting that in the chat, it is my pleasure to welcome and introduce our guests today. Carolina Páez, Maria Becerro, and Jana Petrovich. Nope, I said that wrong, even though I practiced. Petrichevich. Jana Petrichevich. All right, so first up, we're joined by Carolina Páez, a master certified coach and senior consultant who's had nearly 3 decades of experience working with senior leaders around the world. She partners with CEOs and executive teams to strengthen leadership impact, align culture with strategy, and navigate complexity with clarity, and especially with heart. Known for her rare blend of strategic rigor and genuine warmth, Carolina creates space for honest dialogue and courageous growth. She's currently leading Leadership Circle teams across EMEA and LATAM and is an integral member of our global faculty. Also with us today is Maria Becerro, a seasoned leadership consultant and coach who partners with executive teams and others across Europe and Latin America to navigate complexity, drive performance, and lead with presence. She blends heart and head in a beautiful way, creating safe and creative spaces where leaders can explore their strengths, they can confront their challenges, and they can align their actions with their purpose. Maria helps my clients manage pressure, foster innovation, and build sustainable impact. And she's always inviting them to evolve personally and professionally while staying grounded in what truly matters. And then finally, Jana Petrichevich helps leaders and teams step into bold, more authentic leadership, especially in complex and fast-moving environments. With nearly 2 decades of experience as a corporate manager and an entrepreneur, she combines curiosity, clarity, and energy to create spaces where leaders can stretch, where they can take risks, and they can achieve results that really matter. Jana partners with executives in industries from tech to pharmaceuticals and guides them to turn change into opportunity. Her clients say she inspires both reflection and action, pushing leaders to grow while staying true to their vision. Wow. In other words, we've got a powerhouse of coaches and leaders here with us today. And I am thrilled to welcome you, ladies. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation. I just want to say something. Thank you. I'm super excited to be here with Shanna and with Maria. What a wonderful way to spend time together. So I just want to say thank you again and again, because this is a privilege.
Likewise, same. Super excited to have this conversation together with you three.
Same here. Thank you.
Well, thank you. So now, okay, let's start with the absolute basics to get kind of a level set on what we talk about, what we mean when we say courageous authenticity. How do you, in your coaching conversations, in your debriefs, how do you introduce this dimension to the leaders that you're working with?
I start saying what is not and what it is. What is not, what it looks like. And for example, I say, it's not throwing a ball in the room and just running away after saying something that might be true. but it's not going to create cohesion, or it's not going to bring more curiosity, or it's not going to create connection. That's one example, because I don't want to take the word. What else?
Mhm. I would say how I explain to my clients, it's about speaking directly. It's about being honest. It's about bringing integrity and being able to stay in conflict, not running away, as you're saying, Carolina. This is how I explain it to my clients. What about you, Sana?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm just now listening to what you're saying. And actually, what instinctively comes to me is that I go to how do you feel when you stepping into courageous authenticity? And it's always this slightly uncomfortable feeling. And now, as I'm saying this, I also peeked a little bit in the chat and I saw somebody defining courageous authenticity with grace with an edge. So you kind of, you feel a little bit at an edge as you're stepping into that courageous authenticity. It doesn't feel comfortable, but it feels important, and based on your values, it feels right to bring that truth. So it might be like speaking truth from the heart that is important, and it's never easy and it's never super comfortable.
I love how you've all described that. And Maya, the phrase that you used, being willing to stay in conflict is something that stands out to me, because I think there's a possibility for some confusion. Courageous authenticity as a term sounds like something we hear a lot, these days, particularly from influencers, about you have to just be yourself, right? Be fully yourself. But what we mean is slightly more than that, right? And so you're talking about, Jana, you mentioned sticking to your values, truth with heart. How else can you help a leader understand that distinction?
Yeah. As you asked that, Sarah, I'm just kind of thinking, before I started this whole leadership development, my own journey, it was quite dangerous for me to be myself, because you could maybe think that courageous authenticity many times means to be really angry and blunt, which is exactly not what it is. This is what you mentioned at the beginning, Karas. It's not like, dropping the bomb and then somebody else cleans the mess, right? Even though I'm sure we've met so many leaders that actually think that is courageous authenticity, forgetting that there are two important elements when we speak about courageous authenticity. One of them is permission. The other one is responsibility, which actually means giving yourself full permission to be who you are, and yet taking the responsibility for the impact that creates. So giving myself full permission to be open, straightforward, to bring the truth, and yet taking the responsibility of the impact that is going to create in our relationship, in our system, in the context. Right? Because leadership doesn't happen in isolation, and we're never alone. And just going by, let me be who I am and drop it out there, may not create a leadership impact that I've really intended.
I totally agree with what you're saying, Zana, because I think that there's some misunderstanding sometimes with what courageous authenticity is, at least with the clients I coach. And sometimes this thing about I want to be myself, if I forget about the impact that being myself has, I think that's an important point related to what you were saying. So it's this thing also to take into account the impact, and also the ability of taking responsibility, as you were saying, of my own mistakes. Also being able to say, "Hey, I I was wrong," and that's also about courageous authenticity. It's not only about the others; it's also about turning the camera inward and looking to our own truth.
Yeah, I would add also that this is bringing truth at service of something, right? This is not only I'm going to speak up about something, but why do I want to bring this in this moment? What is the impact I want to create, and what is going to happen with this system if I bring this? Of course, courageous authenticity happens a lot. Like we can show this competency a lot when we are in relationship with others, but not necessarily. Sometimes the most courageous thing that can happen is me having a conversation with myself as well, right? Saying the truth, being loyal to myself, talking about my values with myself, and then after having this inner dialogue, I can come outside and say, hey, I raise my hand. I want to bring something with curiosity and flexibility as well. I am not owning a truth that is like the last word. I am just having this perspective that I want to share, but I am curious to see if I bring this, what is going to happen in this meeting or in this conversation. Maybe it provokes more conversation or another point of view that I can change as well, right? It's not courageous authenticity with yourself. I am this way, and who cares if I am wrong, right? And I love what Maria and Shanna are sharing because it's about accountability as well.
Yeah.
I love that. How do a leader's inner beliefs and assumptions influence their ability to demonstrate courageous authenticity, particularly in different cultural contexts?
Well, I don't know.
Go on, Maria.
Yeah, I think that this, for me, from my experience, from my own experience myself, also with my clients, but first myself, what I have experienced is that in courageous authenticity, there are two currents. An ascendant one that makes you be more courageous, authentic. And that's directly related to what, Caro, you were saying before. It's about connected to when you connect to your values, when you connect what really matters, when you connect to a purpose, then it's natural. It's more natural. It's ascendant to show yourself more courageous and authentic. And what you're bringing now, there's a descendant current. When you connect with inner beliefs and assumptions that are connected to the reactive, that is going to pull you down. That is going to bring your courageous authenticity back down, because you're going to start saying, this is not a good idea. It's not a good idea to be in conflict. It's not a good idea. I will not be smart. I will not be loved. I will not be. So it's completely linked. One, the values to bring your courageous authenticity up and your integrity, and the inner beliefs when you connect with reactive inner beliefs and assumptions. That's my experience. What about you, ladies?
Yeah, I love what you're saying. As you're saying that, I'm immediately kind of running myself through the circle, and for me, linking it to the belonging, and I need to be accepted, right? So just going back to the way I was raised, and to some narratives that I constructed in the earliest stage of my life, it was actually about it's good to belong, right? And you don't risk that. No matter what truth you see that would be worth bringing or speaking up, you don't do that. You allow that space for somebody else, to rock the boat or to speak up, or to you wait a little bit, right? Because you don't want to risk belonging, which is then exactly what kind of pulls down my courageous authenticity, because there's always an inner belief I might not belong if I now speak up, right? And then obviously all the layers to that, because I'll be judged, I'll be misunderstood. It's not mine to bring that. Who am I to say that? And whatever the variations of these stories may come to the forefront of my mind, and actually making me not making me courageously authentic, but keeping me safe.
Yeah, and if we add these early years of our life with the culture, right? So, for example, belonging in some cultures means survival. It's like if you don't belong, you don't survive. So some cultures, for example, Latin American culture, has been built on the idea of we all survive together. We grow up in communities. Neighborhoods take care of the kids of the neighborhood, So it's super important to understand that sometimes challenging these reactive tendencies is challenging strong cultures. Or, for example, family, the concept of family, the elders. You respect your elders, so you don't speak when they are speaking. You don't talk to them. Maybe you're in the table just having a dinner, and you learn that, but suddenly 30 years later, you're having a conversation with your boss who in your eyes has a lot of power. And then you have to confront your leader, which is very difficult because you have been learning things around authority, the relationship with power, the relationship with belonging. So this journey of integrating courageous authenticity is a journey it's a hero's journey. There is a lot to conquer in order to go to the ascendant current that Maria is talking about. It requires tons of courage. And that's the reason I adore the name of our competency, that is courageous authenticity, because it's not only authenticity, it requires a use of your will, in order to break a lot of patterns or ideas that you have about what is acceptable in certain society or in when you are in a meeting in corporate world, etc.
Yeah.
And also one thing to add is that related to context, but also that we are now 4 women sitting in the table talking about courageous authenticity. And I think that specifically for us as women, this is something that stretches us a lot, at least me. Courageous authenticity is one of my stretches, indeed. So I think that specifically for women in any context, this is something that we want to put on the table. No?
Yeah. Sarah, can I still build on this, because I really love the conversation. So first of all, what you're saying, Caro, it requires us actually to redefine our relationship with power. Right. And we've got different definitions of power depending which cultures and in which periods of history we grew up. Right. If I think about my own story, the power is something that somebody else has. We don't have it in our family. Right. We're just a hardworking family. We're keeping our heads down and we're working our way towards success without much of speaking up. Right. That was what we had. Our power in our dedication to hard work. Our power was not sitting in our courage to, speak up at the table, right? And then obviously the way that life works is that when you suddenly start challenging that, the universe responds with some sort of a risk, testing your boundaries. Like, do you really want to go there? Do you really want to be that courageously authentic, or do you want to retreat back into safety the way that you were kind of constructed and structured throughout your life? So yeah, I mean, for me, that has always been a topic. And if we bring this to the in the context of working with our clients as leadership circle practitioners, that informs me that no matter what the definition of courageous authenticity is, we need to hear the story, right? We need to hear the story of that client, where they grew up and what was that context like and what was permissible or not, to actually be able to understand what role courageous authenticity or the lack of it plays in their leadership and in their development.
I love that, Jenna, and it's kind of a beautiful and perfect segue into what I want the next part of our conversation to be about, which is really using courageous authenticity as an entry point for debriefs and for coaching conversations. You're talking about needing to understand the leader's story, that context around, how they're showing up in their profile, how they show up to the others, to their evaluators. So maybe let's start here. When does a leader's score in the profile in Courageous Authenticity stand out to you? Whether that score is high or low, what are some of the things that might indicate to you as a coach about how they show up as a leader, about their operating system?
I always take a look on the full profile, right? So leadership effectiveness is something that I always take a look, right? We can find leaders not having courageous authenticity and being effective as leaders. And said this, the fact that somebody has courageous authenticity is almost like a predictor of leadership effectiveness, because there is a lot of vulnerability required when you show up with courageous authenticity, and people wants to follow humans. Like radical humanity is important. It's one of the conditions of scaling leadership in one of our books, right? So I take a look on everything. And of course, all the compliant, when the compliant in the reactive is super high and we have a low courageous authenticity, this is a good entrance point, right? There is some energy that is not used to have the difficult conversation, but is used in being silent, or is used in keeping harmony in a team, or in belonging, right? Which is a good intention, but there is more possibilities for this leader if it's not spending this amount of energy taking care of what is going to say, how it's going to be said, instead of bringing these powerful questions. Of course, noticing that there are things at risk. I was listening, Jana, and one of the questions that I adore to ask when we are talking about courageous authenticity is what's at risk, something that we learn in our certification process, right? And there is something that is at risk. It's at risk, very important things, right? But just coming back to your question, I think I take a look in the whole thing, and then I take a look on the reactive and the dynamics in between reactive and creative. I would say that.
Excellent.
Yeah, I would join in there, especially looking at the complying, looking at the pleasing, many times also looking at the passive and that idea of being submissive, right? Almost kind of, giving your power away or stepping into your courageous authenticity. And one other thing that I love to actually look at, that I'm always very curious about, is just on the creative end, is the score in integrity and in courageous authenticity. Mm-hmm. Because somehow in my head, I'm always kind of thinking courageous authenticity is partially integrity in action, right? Because integrity is almost like a being part, right? Am I aligned with my values? Do I know what I stand for? Do I on the being level? But courageous authenticity is, do I dare to express it? Right? Because knowing your values is one thing. Taking a stand for your values in terms of an action, that's a whole different level of risk. Mm-hmm. Right? And that's what I love to see. Okay, this leader might be aware of their values. They know who they are. Are they ready to, and what are they ready to risk for that? Are they ready to take any risks for that?
I love what you're saying about the dynamic of the whole profile and how courageous authenticity relates to the creative and the reactive at the same time. What I do when I'm preparing for a debrief and when I see high or low courageous authenticity, I take a look, as Carol was saying, on the whole profile and try to make my own assumptions on what is happening when I see the whole profile. For example, the relationship with integrity, as Anna was saying, or the relationship with purposeful and visionary, or the relationship with protecting, which is also complying, you already explained. But in protecting, when I see a profile that is high in protecting, in for example, in distant or in critical, and also maybe high in courageous authenticity, which is something that we also see, I start myself making questions to then bring to the conversation in the debrief about what is happening here when you show up from a protecting perspective, and when you connect to more courageous authenticity, what's different there? Which sometimes we find leaders that are very high in arrogance, for example, and show also very high in courageous authenticity. So to help the leader to make this distinction related to the impact that we talked previously, that's the point that we try to put on the table for the client.
I would also add, take a look to the commentary, right? Like to the words, like the words of the system. Sometimes they say, for example, what is the challenge? We want to listen more your voice. We want you to participate more in meetings. We know that you're having great ideas, but you're not sharing the ideas. That is a high cost of not expressing courageous authenticity. Sometimes my conversation with a leader is not about why you're not speaking up, but it's more about what is this system missing because you are not bringing your voice into the system, right? So I believe there is very like different ways to approach this in a way that the other person can accept more. That is not, hey, you just need to speak up, because it's difficult for so many people. Just, I want to speak up, but I don't know how, right?
And one thing that comes to my mind, Caro, while listening to you is connecting the client. If for example, if the courageous authenticity is low, connecting the client with the cost of not speaking, the cost for himself or herself, the cost for the team, the cost for the organization, and the cost for the system. When we allow the client to connect with the cost, we create this creative tension that we want to bring, so that they connect with what would be why would be a good idea then to speak.
I really love what you all are saying, and I'm keeping an eye a little bit on the chat too. And I don't know if you are as well, but you're speaking directly to some of the comments that are coming up, which is great, particularly that that connection between courageous authenticity and criticism, or the protecting, and making that distinction, how to make that distinction between critical arrogance and courageous authenticity, and also this conversation about energy, both the cost of the energy and the maybe willingness or ability to pour energy into complying as opposed to having courageous authenticity or that kind of thing. There's a lot of great interest in that. So before we kind of close out this part of the conversation, I'm just curious, is there anything further that you'd want to comment on, maybe those two things, that distinction between arrogance, critical, and courageous authenticity, and this idea of energy, putting energy into one or more of these dimensions, these aspects?
I would say that the energy that you spend protecting yourself, sometimes putting a mask on yourself, being silent in a meeting when you feel your heart like beating super fast, wanting to say something, like the high cost of the energy is so high, and it's so different when you live, not when you practice, when you live from a place of courageous authenticity. There is so much freedom. There is a release, there is a presence that is grounded, that is like, I'm totally loyal to myself and my values. Even if somebody fire me and I have to leave this company, I say goodbye, but I was loyal to myself. So the difference is huge. When I am in my protecting, for example, in arrogance, I am proving myself all the time. I have to be the smart guy in the room. I have to bring the most intelligent idea. Where I am in courageous authenticity, I'm just curious and I am myself. I finish the meeting and I feel grounded. I don't feel this stress. This is my own experience. I'm talking about myself, like the experience of just being myself and all the energy that is possible to bring in order to create the life that I want, the team that I want, the relationships that I want. I would say that's for me the shift in energy that I experience when I am in courageous authenticity rather than when I am not.
It a lot. Oh, sorry, Zana, go.
No, go ahead, Maria. Go.
No, I was going to say that for me, I love the question about the energy. And for me, it's about fulfillment, which is not necessarily the same as being happy or being in comfort. But when you show courageous, authentic, even in a difficult conversation, at the end, you feel fulfilled because you have connected to your values, you have connected to your own integrity, and that brings an energy of fulfillment. That is not necessarily the same as being happy, but it's fulfilled, which is a very nice feeling, as Carol was bringing. Zana.
Yeah. So just listening to all of you, and for me, there's something about as you doing this kind of, Caro, I'm thinking about the groundedness, right? The groundedness, and then also the fulfillment of this feels right for me. And there's something about clarity and safety, because I feel when stepping into courageous authenticity, you're in a position to bring clarity, and no matter how uncomfortable it may be, you're actually creating safety. Because so many times somebody has finally said or addressed something that pretty much everybody is saying, but nobody is talking about that, right? Pretty much everybody is feeling. They're feeling something in the energy, but nobody has just said, there, it's here. And while saying that, there's an element of self-managing, managing your own energy in terms of your own emotions, so that they can be brought in a grounded and a clear way, rather than all over the place.
Just want to add something, Shana and Maria. When you were saying this, I'm thinking of something that we learned in leadership program of CTI. I remember they say leaders stay. When you bring this truth, then you stay. You hold the space. And even if you did a mistake because you brought this and it wasn't the right moment or something, then you stay and you navigate uncomfort. You navigate your impact. You ask more questions. You learn. You can do a recap. You can say, hey, guys, I did a mistake. I'm sorry, I'm learning so much from this. And this lightness and this freedom again that comes when you stay, which whatever you bring is very much connected with the safety you're talking about.
Excellent. Thank you for those additional insights. They're fantastic. Well, I want to move the conversation a little bit to sort of these coaching conversation starters. And Maria, you shared a sample profile that we might take a look at. Is now a good time to bring it up, and maybe we can just talk a little bit about some of these entry points and some of the ways that you as coaches can help a leader get curious about their profiles, their leadership style, by looking at their profile. It looks like maybe I'm not a host or something. Crystal, can you make sure that I can share? I'm going to share my screen then when we have that possibility.
Craig and Sarah.
Got it. Okay, you should all be looking at a profile now. And I can zoom in if necessary, but we wanted to see the whole thing at first. So when you see a profile like this, what is maybe the thing that jumps out to you? I mean, I know what jumps out to me about courageous authenticity, but I'm curious from your perspective as coaches.
I would like to ask Caro and Zana, since I was the coach of this person, what would you ask this leader if you had to debrief tomorrow?
Well, the first thing I'd ask is what jumps right at them as they're looking at their profile, right? What are they curious about? And then see how they take it from there. And probably by the time we would get to this bit, what are you curious about? We would already have heard their story. Right here, I'm super interested in their story because I'm absolutely sure that story holds some sort of a doorway or some sort of a key to actually make sense of the score of courageous authenticity among everything else that's visible on this graph.
Yeah, I would add, I adore your questions, Rana. I would say if we play a little bit here about an interpretation practice that is not in the conversation with the client. Let's imagine that we are just preparing the debrief. I would be super curious and I would play a little bit with the shadow flag in critical, right? So when you don't integrate first your critical, there is no way you are going to develop courageous authenticity. Like you need to practice before you integrate this and you transcend it to courageous authenticity. So I would ask my client, what do you think about a critical person? And let's imagine that he's going to say, or she's going to say, I hate it. I just don't stand people that is critical because they disrupt the energy or something like that. And I would play a little bit to say, what is the good thing? What is the gift of being critical, right? Because then with the gift, you begin to create the case for the development, right, into courageous authenticity. This is me just playing with the interpretation, but I am super curious, Maria. You were the coach. What can you share about this?
Yeah, when we were looking for a profile for the webinar today, I immediately connect with this lady. It's the CEO of she's the CEO of a very important foundation of people with disabilities in Spain, a very big one. And when I was preparing for the debrief, I remember that I was so surprised on how creative she shows in all of the creative competencies, and also if you can put a zoom into the leadership effectiveness down, and that the one in the bottom, you see that her leadership effectiveness is more than 95 percentile. And I don't know if you can see it, but her own self-assessment on leadership effectiveness was super low, was almost zero, which was something that really surprised me. Well, as you were saying, Zana, the story and the context is key in any profile, but specifically in this one. The situation or the story of this profile and this CEO is that she was running this foundation for the last 15 years, and she was incredibly successful in bringing the foundation to the forefront of the foundations regarding people with disability in Spain. So that's why she was showing having such incredible high scores in the creative. The thing that happened is that the president of the board changed, and there was a new person in the board as the president, and this person was bringing very different values in terms of what people with intellectual disabilities should move to, which was crafting with the values that were before. So the CEO was not able to speak, and this what you share, Caro, about the shadow flag in critical. She had an inner belief and assumption on critical that being critical is not a good idea, and that was connecting to the belonging. See the belonging. So if I criticize this new president, she's not going to like me, or I'm not going to be loved, or I'm going to not be recognized. So this was this situation of the critical and the belonging, the inner beliefs associated to that was absolutely pulling her courageous authenticity down. And that was the work that we did during the coaching process, not to work on the shadow flag, on critical, and the belonging.
Wow, interesting, amazing.
Yeah, and it's interesting now that you're saying that, is that her self-score on both integrity and courageous authenticity is low. Right? So it will be interesting. So being aware probably of that she's not speaking up. She has her own inner story around how much she really walks the talk or lives her values.
Yeah. Absolutely. One thing that you both mentioned before that was also on the table in this coaching process was about what truth you are not putting on the table. What is that you think that you should speak, that you're not talking with the president? So this kind of conversation about what are you not putting on the table was something that was very key for the coaching process.
Yeah.
Oh, Caro, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. I would love to put kind of narrative to the evaluators. For example, when somebody scores you very low in courageous authenticity, is a way of saying, we know you have things you want to say, or you have an opinion about this, but you are choosing to be in silence. So when you imagine, and you bring this to your client, right? It's like people is noticing. This is not a secret, right? People is noticing that there's something. For example, with your example, Maria, she needed to speak up. There is something about this person that she was like just needing this. The system was aware. And of course, when you see this self-score and the others score, is like, yeah, you're silent. You need to speak up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if I may just say one other thing, I'm curious. I don't know if that was the case. Her self-score is quite high, right? And I kind of learned throughout the years that also speaks about your own loyalty, right? You don't like change, you don't like to change, you don't like to rock the boat, but there's also an element of that is that because you're being loyal probably to the system that she has created herself, right? And brought to that level. So does it mean that being courageously authentic, she would think she stopped being loyal to what she once created? That's also an interesting, I think, avenue to explore.
Absolutely, Zana. And this was also part because all these inner beliefs, the critical, the conservative, the belonging ones, mix with each other and create this behavior of not speaking. So absolutely.
That was such a great example. Thank you for sharing that with us, Maria, and for exploring it, both of you, all of you. We're coming up with just about 12 minutes to the top of the hour, so I want to be real cognizant of time. I knew this would be an issue that we'd have trouble putting all of this good insight into just an hour. And actually, I want to kind of start to move towards some questions that have come up, and so into a bit of a Q&A session. And the first of these is this came up a little bit in the very beginning when we were talking about the cultural context and kind of socialization. And we talked about the fact that this is for women sharing this conversation about courageous authenticity. But in your experience, what are maybe some of the biggest challenges for women and for members of minority communities in expressing courageous authenticity within organizations, within teams, and how can coaches help support them?
These are great questions. I want to start. I would say, first of all, it's a reality that women in leadership, it's been a conquering process, and raising your voice and talking about what you think is important. It's been, I don't want to diminish the history, it's been a battle. Second, what's been acceptable is bring your masculine energy, and sometimes courageous authenticity requires that, but requires tons of feminine energy as well, because you bring this longing for connection or for vulnerability, right? So it's been a journey to say, I am not feeling okay about this conversation, like in the past conversations like that in corporate world was like, it doesn't matter your feelings, why you're talking about your feelings, right? So it's been difficult. The other thing is I have found many women or people that are minorities inside of an organization struggling because there is a sense of not deserving the position sometimes. Or it's like, oh, this is such a privilege that I am so thankful that I don't bring my voice because I just want to belong and to be part of this organization. So I'm just bringing quick things because I'm aware of the time and I want to listen, Shana and Maria.
Yeah, I what you share, Caro, thank you. Connect me to the imposter syndrome that many women specifically we have. And connecting the clients with this and allowing to connect with, yeah, I'm here not because if I'm the CEO of an organization, it's not by chance. It's because it's my place. So connecting with that, it's also a way of allowing to talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely agree with what both of you are bringing. And for me, again, what pops up is this word permission, right? As women, do we give ourselves permission, or are we, even after we have worked hard and we got our promotion and we are now delivering, having extraordinary performance, are we still waiting for a permission to speak as we sit at the table? Right? Are we still? Is there still a narrative around? I might take too much. I'm too much, or whatever. Too much of energy. Too much talking. Too much. I'm too much. Right. So this is what I think we need to. We need to become aware of that permission is something that comes from us, to ourselves. Obviously, taking care of our impact, but it's not something that we need to wait for somebody else to give us that permission.
I love that. Thank you. We've got a great question coming from Chad about the difference between self scores and courageous authenticity and evaluator scores. And so the question is coming saying, regardless of whether or not the self score is low and the evaluator score is high, or the opposite is true, what are some of the questions or the elements that you can help a leader focus on to work on that? Let's see, the exact question was which sections of the support material. So I'm thinking about the if you score low and if you score high sections in the interpretation manual, for courageous authenticity. Like what aspects would maybe be a first step for a coach to help a leader with that huge gap between evaluator and self scores?
I usually for courageous authenticity, but in any of when I find a gap and when the client is curious about it, I use a lot I usually go to the questions related to, in this case, courageous authenticity. And by reading the concrete questions associated to courageous authenticity, they can understand, oh, I can understand why I score myself like this. And I can understand why my evaluators score myself. This is one way. I don't know. What about you, Dana and Carol?
Yeah, we'll probably have a conversation around the intention and the impact, right? So looking at the self-score, what is your intention? When you think of yourself as courageously authentic, what's really your intention? And how, and then as you mentioned before, Caro, going also into the written comments, where we may find a little bit more around the actual impact, right? What's there maybe in the written comments that can point you to some of the things that are your actual impact in the courageous authenticity? And then how do we sit with the gap a little bit to see what to explore there?
And a good source of information could be also a score in integrity. And if you take a look on the interpretation manual, in the competencies and the beliefs and narrative associate and behaviors associated with this, sometimes it's just, I am not perceived like acting with courageous authenticity because I am playing a lot of political games. for example, and even though I am bringing my truth in the meeting, I'm also playing some games behind the scenes, and people is not feeling that I am working from integrity. So integrity is a platform for courageous authenticity. I am more entitled to bring my truth if I am standing on my values, right? When I am not standing on my values, then people cannot perceive me with a lot of courageous authenticity. They can see maybe that I am bringing some interesting questions or opinions, but it's different than really being embodying, courageous authenticity.
Jana, you just mentioned impact, intent, and impact. And here's an interesting question that's come up. How do you encourage leaders to observe and reflect on the impact that their authentic actions have on their teams and organizations?
Well, again, depending on the context and depending on the story. But what I always love for us to close with some sort of a safe to fail experiment, right? To just kind of notice if we just take courageous authenticity, if you were to practice courageous authenticity, why don't we start with reflection first? Right? Why don't we start maybe with just become aware of the maybe situations that would invite you to be courageously authentic. Notice what's happening even in your body in those moments. Notice what you feel, notice how you act, and then observe the other's reactions or responses to that. Maybe write down, journal, come back to me. We'll speak about it in our follow-up session. And that's how we fine-tune a little bit how to bring the intention and the impact closer over time. But I'm also about to start a Pulse certification, so I should be able to tell you more once I've done that. Just for other people who think that I've done it all and that I've got a Pulse certification. I don't, but I will soon.
I was going to say gather feedback. It's like go. If you believe you are acting with courageous authenticity, why don't you have some coffee conversations, like informal conversation? Ask the people, how do you perceive me? If you have your boss that score you low, if you feel you have this courageous authenticity, it's not going to be that hard to ask the question and say, hey, why did you score me low? If I am perceiving myself high, right? Like to really gather the information, of course, journaling and all of that. But I want to listen to Maria because we're about to close.
I was also thinking about this. Getting the feedback is so important to measure the impact and to see if your intention is close or not. So yeah, I think that you both talk on. I mean, I don't have anything else to add. So.
Well, then that takes us to a fantastic opportunity to close up with 2 minutes left until the top of the hour. I just want to thank you, all three of you, again, for such a really great and rich conversation. And everyone who joined us on the call today, thank you for joining us. If you like this kind of conversation, then come back next month, December 3rd. We're going to be talking about caring connection with Leadership Circle Principal Tyson Andrus. And you can actually register right now for that webinar if you want. I think I saw Melissa put the link in the chat earlier, but go ahead and check that out. And be sure to watch your inbox and Leadership Circle social media for details about other Surfacing Creative Leadership announcements, events, and resources. On behalf of Leadership Circle and our featured guest, Carolina, Maria, Jana, thank you so much. I am Sarah Stahl saying we appreciate your time and attention today, and we will see you next time.